one question. It's connected to a lot of what we've been discussing, but it's something that you said in a talk, and you didn't want to go into this. You know, you sort of kind of gave this as a little side comment that you couldn't go into because it just would take too long to talk about. I just wanted to ask you a question that would help you get to that place again, because I was very curious about this. You said women are probably responsible for most of the discoveries which have advanced evolution, and there's a good reason for that. Can you kind of just unpack that a little bit and just kind of delve into it?
Women are responsible for most of the discoveries that have advanced evolution. Well, I don't think there's a particular mystery about that. For one thing, it's pretty clear that agriculture was invented by women, probably. I mean, men were out doing hunter-gathering stuff, doing the macho things, killing the buffalo or whatever, the tigers, and bringing it in. Women were there looking after the kids, making the food, right? Making the garbage pile into which they're throwing the seeds after they clean the food, noticing, and they're in a position to notice, hey, plants, the ones that we eat, are growing up out of the garbage pile. It's a pretty elementary observation, but then, you know, the light bulb comes on. It says we don't have to go forage in the forest for these things. We can actually just clear a spot and grow these things. Agriculture is probably the most significant thing that ever happened to us as a species, you know, and it was women that did that, you know, and women are, I think, because of the connection to children and just their inherent nature, they're closer to biology than men are, you know, and this sort of miracle of fecundity and reproduction and all that. To them, it's an everyday reality. We, men, we have to alter our consciousness to get close to that. Women are kind of in that place all the time in a certain intuitive way. So I think that women, you know, had a great deal to contribute in terms of, if agriculture was sort of the pivot point that let us turn from hunter-gatherer type existence, which is not necessarily a bad way to live, but into a more sedentary kind of existence that then made things like, you know, civilization and technology and art and music and all of these other things, and science and politics and patriarchy. I mean, these things are two many-edged swords, you know. But I think women, this really originated with women. And like everything, you know, I mean, Eve is the progenitor of our species, whatever that concept. And that's what I think. I mean, I don't know that it's a profound statement. I just think it's an intuition. You know, I mean, ayahuasca, for example, people experience ayahuasca as a feminine entity often. But then, of course, there's always the outlier that doesn't experience it that way. And I'm not sure that, you know, there's a temptation to sort of fall into the sort of pre-concepts, which are, some of them are heavily influenced by New Age thinking and all that, and that's basically okay. But that's what it comes down to. That's why it's important to kind of, you know, have this personal encounter. And I mean, there are tribes that use ayahuasca that view it as a masculine thing, and in some cases there's no sexuality. It doesn't have that kind of personality. Mushrooms, for example, are, you know, in a lot of indigenous culture and in my own experiences, they're neither masculine nor feminine. You know, they're more like children, actually. They're asexual. And many cultures, you know, those that use them, they liken them to children. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those, yet another thing that I feel like we either weren't educated on growing up, you know, or we were miseducated on growing up. You know, I don't think we ever hear that statement that women were responsible for most of the practices that led to our evolution. just doesn't seem like that's part of the narrative. And I find it to be really interesting.
The cultural narrative is a patriarchal narrative, you know. I mean, the victors get to write history, and you know, the women's contributions have always been suppressed, you know, because I think in terms of the male fear, in some ways, that if we acknowledge that, that will somehow diminish us, you know, diminish our sex, and it will make it harder to, you know, sort of appoint ourselves. We're the ones, we men are running things. We're the ones that are making all the difference and making the difference in the world. But that goes back to the whole illusion that we are running things. We're not running things, you know, and but it's more convenient for us on a political level and a social level if we get people to buy into the you know, to the idea that men are in control, and you know, I look at the mess that's gotten us into. You know, I mean, I say let the women have it. They can't do a worse job than we've done. You know,
I mean,
women are too smart to say, why would we want it? You know.
Yeah, right. You know, it gives me a little bit of hope, because if we're not in charge, and yet we think we are, and there's all this terrible stuff happening in the world, that I think there's this cloud of just doom and gloom that we're all kind of feeling, whether it's directly or sort of subtly. It kind of brings some hope that this ecosystem wouldn't have, you know, it knows what it's doing, and maybe it'll be the end of us, but at least it might not be the end of this entire planet and as we know it.
Yeah, I don't think it will be the end of the entire planet. I mean, that's actually something I like about Buhner's work, because he points out, you know, our species may not may not persist. We may go extinct, and that's bad for us as a species, since we happen to belong to that species. That may be one of the best things that could happen to the planet. And life is really tough. Life is really resistant, you know, and resilient. And we, you know, as we look at extreme environments on the planet, I mean, the most unlikely places, you know, the bottoms of volcanic vents, you know, miles and miles down into the Earth's crust, you encounter living things everywhere. And so, you know, life is one tough bitch in a certain way. And, you know, the conditions on the Earth would have to be extreme, really extreme, for all life to disappear. I mean, we know from evolutionary history, there have been times when 95% of all terrestrial organisms have disappeared. Usually that clears the deck for a new flowering and diversity in the next phase. I'm not so worried about life persisting on the planet. I mean, sooner or later, we know there's going to be a supernova, and you know, everything is going to be burned up. But hopefully, by that time, we'll have figured out how to get off the planet, and that may be, you know, that may be part of Gaia's strategy, is to kind of force us to do that. Okay, you know, so it's like these primates were the cleverest things and the stupidest things and the most dangerous, you know, development in evolution. So a lot of hopes are riding on us for being the catalyst that will enable us to escape when the time comes. But it's sort of like, you know, working with nuclear energy or something. I mean, there's a lot of cool things you can do with nuclear energy. It's not a bad thing necessarily, but it's also extremely dangerous. So it takes wisdom, and that's what we lack. We are, you know, I think that's part of the big challenge is, you know, we're very clever. There's no doubt about that. You look at what we do and we're very clever. And now we're clever enough to manipulate processes that can have a global impact and an impact into the future. So now we have to get wise. That's much harder. And, you know, and that's where the teacher plants come in, because they're teachers. They will teach us this lesson. And like students, we can pay attention or not, you know, and but we don't pay attention to our detriment, I think.